Have you ever had your heart broken, felt betrayed, or carried pain that did not feel fair for you to carry? Maybe someone lied. Maybe someone misunderstood you, or someone broke your trust. Maybe someone walked away from you in a way that left you wondering if you ever really mattered. One of the hardest parts about pain like that is sometimes the moment will end, but inside you, it keeps happening. You're driving to work and suddenly your brain reopens a case. Or you're trying to fall asleep and your nervous system says, actually, tonight would be a great time to review every detail. Or you're having a normal day and one memory walks into the room like it owns the place and suddenly you're back in it. What they said, what they did, what they should have known, what you wish you would have said, what you wish you would have seen sooner. I've walked with a lot of people through this kind of pain. Betrayal, rejection, broken trust, misunderstandings that turn into real heartache. And I've had my own experiences too. I know what it is like when a misunderstanding begins to feel like betrayal. Then betrayal starts to feel like misrepresented. And then being misrepresented turns into rejection. Then rejection starts to feel like abandonment. And suddenly you are not just dealing with one painful moment. You are dealing with the emotional avalanche that came after it. That pain is real. Sometimes it's not just emotional. It's physical. It's like tightness in your chest, trouble breathing, anger that rises so fast it scares you, or sadness that makes you feel worthless, hopelessness that whispers maybe disappearing would hurt less than staying here and feeling this. And if you've ever been in that place, I want to say this clearly. You are not weak, you're not being dramatic, and you are not broken because the pain still hurts. Sometimes pain stays loud because something inside us is still trying to understand what happened. And before we can let go, we have to be honest about what we are actually holding. Because letting go does not mean pretending it did not hurt. It does not mean what happened was okay. It definitely does not mean there are no consequences, and it does not mean trust automatically comes back. But most of all, it definitely does not mean you hand unsafe people a spare key into your life and say, come on in, I'm trying to be emotionally evolved. No. That is not healing. That is how old wounds create new wounds. That is how you end up with a nervous system filing a formal complaint against you. Letting go is not about letting someone else off the hook. Letting go is about getting yourself off the hook. It's about freedom. It's about no longer letting the wound lead your life. One reason letting go is so hard is that rumination feels like protection. Rumination is when your mind keeps replaying the hurt over and over again. And sometimes people shame themselves for that. They say, why can't I stop thinking about this? But your brain is not replaying the story because it's stupid. It is replaying the story because it is trying to protect you. Your brain is trying to figure out, how did this happen? What did I miss? How do I make sure this never happens again? And what does this mean about them? And also, what does it mean about me? In other words, your brain becomes a very anxious detective with a corkboard, red string, and absolutely no respect for bedtime. And I know that place very, very well. I know what it is like to lie awake replaying conversations, imagining what I should have said, wishing I had said nothing at all, building a courtroom argument in my mind ready to attack, trying to prove why I did what I did, or why it hurt, why it mattered, why someone finally should understand me. And sometimes the fantasy is not just about understanding. Sometimes that moves over into I want justice, or sometimes I want revenge. Sometimes you imagine the whole world finally seeing what happened and agreeing with you. And for a moment, that fantasy feels powerful and alluring. It feels like maybe the pain would finally be balanced. But then if you're paying attention, something else often shows up. For me, that's guilt and shame. Because you imagine the pain in their eyes if they felt what you felt. And even though part of you wants them to understand the hurt, another part of you knows you do not actually want to become the kind of person who rejoices in someone else's suffering. That is the war inside resentment. It wants justice, but sometimes it also starts shaping us into someone we do not want to become. And that is one of the reasons forgiveness matters. Not because what happened was okay, not because they deserve unlimited access to your life, but because staying trapped in revenge, resentment, and rumination can slowly hand your peace over to the person who hurt you. And that is too much power for them to have. They don't deserve it. Another reason letting go is hard is that we are often grieving more than what happened. We are grieving what the event meant. A betrayal is not just a betrayal. A rejection is not just a simple rejection. A misunderstanding is not just a misunderstanding. Sometimes you are grieving the loss of a relationship, the loss of fairness, the loss of people who once encouraged you, loved you, and wanted you around, and suddenly seemed able and capable of walking away with ease. And underneath that grief, there may be deeper questions and pain that's starting to bubble to the surface, such as, was I ever good enough? Did I matter as much as I thought I did? Was the relationship real? Am I too flawed to keep loving? Those questions hurt. They stab you to the core. And sometimes people try to rush to forgiveness because they do not want to feel that grief. They want to jump straight to peace, which I completely understand. It sounds amazing and wonderful to avoid the visceral pain. Peace sounds wonderful when you are in just exquisite pain. And quite honestly, grief sounds like work. And frankly, grief has terrible branding. But grief has a purpose. And if we do not allow ourselves to feel grief, the pain often stays stuck. Because you cannot release what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot heal a wound you keep minimizing. And you cannot let go of pain by pretending it was not painful. Sometimes in therapy, a person starts by talking about what someone did. But underneath the event, there's something deeper. Questions or comments like, I thought I mattered to them. I thought I was safe. I thought they cared. I thought they knew who they were. I thought this relationship meant something different. That is really grief. And grief needs space. Not forever, not in a way that consumes your whole life, but long enough to tell the truth. Truth like, this hurt me. This changed something in me. I lost something here. And I'm allowed to grieve that. That is not bitterness, that is honesty. And honesty is usually where healing begins. This is where present moment mindfulness can be so helpful. Not because mindfulness makes pain disappear. Trust me, it does not. Mindfulness is not emotional Febreze. You cannot just spray it over betrayal and say, lavender healing. Mindfulness helps us sit with what is actually here. It helps us notice the sadness without drowning in it. It lets us feel the anger without becoming the anger. It sometimes helps us put words to the anger. It lets us recognize the grief without letting grief drive the car. And when the memory comes back, pause. Just name it. This is hurt, or this is that old loop that I used to do, or this is my body trying to protect me. Then ask yourself a few grounding questions. Am I safe right now? If I am safe, how do I know? Is that moment still happening right now? Or is my body still remembering it? What do I want to do with this memory now? Can I imagine loosening my grip on this pain even a little? What might become possible if I stopped carrying it the same way? What is one small thing I can do right now that moves me toward peace? These questions matter because pain can make the past feel very present. Your body may react like the betrayal is happening again, even when you are sitting in your living room, lying in bed, or driving to work. So the goal is not to shame yourself for remembering. The goal is to be gently reminding your body, I'm right here now. That happened then. And I can respond from this present moment. This does not erase the pain, but it helps your body learn that the memory is not the same as this present moment. For me, part of healing happened through prayer, walking, journaling, and talking with my wife. Okay, a lot of walking and a lot of talking. Honestly, this is where the phrase word vomiting became very real in my life, and I use it all the time in practice. I would go on long walks and pour out the pain. Not always in organized sentences. Most of the time, it probably only made sense to my brain. Sometimes healing sounds less like a TED Talk and more like a man walking in circles trying not to explode emotionally in public. And my wife gave me one of the most sacred gifts a person can give. Room to be in pain without putting me on trial. She listened. She did not rush me. She did not throw meaningless platitudes at me like, this will all turn for your good. She trusted that I could feel anger without becoming angry. She trusted that I could feel hurt without staying there forever. She prayed with me. She was present when I journaled because she was next to me. She was a constant reminder that even though some people had left, I was not abandoned. That kind of steadiness and steady love matters forever. Sometimes healing requires at least one safe place where you can tell the truth without feeling like you're back on trial. Another thing I talk a lot about in therapy is the difference between forgiveness and trust. Because people often put those two things in the same box. They think, if I forgive this person, does that not mean I have to trust them again? No, absolutely not. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I can forgive someone for robbing me. That does not mean I'm inviting them back into my house and showing them where I keep all the good snacks. Forgiveness may be something I choose internally. Trust is something that has to be rebuilt relationally. Forgiveness can happen in your heart. Trust requires evidence. Trust requires patterns. Trust requires safety over time. Trust is not rebuilt because someone gave one emotional speech and used the phrase, "I've changed," with impressive eye contact. That might be a start, but trust is rebuilt through consistent behavior, accountability, honesty, repair, humility, changed patterns. And if you still struggle with the idea that you can forgive someone without trusting them, well, my suggestion is become a parent. Parents forgive their children all the time, constantly and repeatedly, sometimes even before breakfast. But that does not mean that they trust them with everything. You could forgive your child and still not hand them the car keys after they backed into the mailbox. You could forgive your child and still say, "No, you may not have your phone back yet." You can forgive your child and still say, "I love you," and there are consequences. That is not unforgiveness. That is parenting. That is wisdom. That is boundaries. And adults are not exempt from that principle. You could forgive someone and still say, "You do not get the same access to me." You could forgive someone and say, "I am not ready to be close again." You could forgive someone and still say, "I need to see changed behavior before trust come back." That does not make you bitter. That makes you honest. And quite honestly, boundaries are not the enemy of forgiveness. Boundaries are often what make healthy forgiveness possible. Forgiveness does not cancel justice or accountability. That is very important to recognize and understand. Because sometimes people resist forgiveness because they think it means they got away with it. But forgiveness does not mean there are no consequences. It does not mean that you ignore the harm, and it does not mean you rewrite the story to make everyone comfortable. It means you stop letting revenge become the only way you know how to relate to the pain. For me, forgiveness meant I no longer needed to seek revenge for the hurt that I felt. It meant choosing peace even without full repair. It meant accepting that some relationships may not return to what they were. It meant respecting other people's choices to have boundaries while also having boundaries of my own. It meant forgiving myself for being imperfect, and trust me, that was the hard part. Because when people leave, it is easy to start asking questions like, what is wrong with me? But I had to learn that just because I have weakness does not mean I am not good enough. Just because I made mistakes does not mean I'm lovable. And just because not everyone likes me does not mean I have no worth. I had to remember who I wanted to become. I want to be the kind of man my wife can trust. I want to be the kind of father my children want to be around. And I want to become more Christ-like in how I treat people. And resentment was not going to make me into that man. Revenge was definitely a barrier for me to become that man. And bitterness was not going to make me that man either. So forgiveness became less about them and more about who I was choosing to become. For me, forgiveness is deeply spiritual. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which makes me Christian. And I am a Christian before I am a counselor. I know that not everyone listening shares that belief, and I respect that. I believe deeply that people have the right to choose what they believe, how they heal, and what they do with pain. So I'm not saying this to force my faith onto anyone. I'm saying it because I cannot honestly tell the story of forgiveness without talking about Jesus Christ. For me, He is where peace became possible. I had to believe that the same Christ who came to save me also came to save the people who hurt me. And I'll be honest, That is an inconveniently holy thought when you are still emotionally preparing your closing arguments. But I had to trust that Christ could judge better than I could. That is my belief. That is where I found rest. I had to trust that He knew the full story. The parts I understood, the parts I misunderstood, the parts they understood, the parts they misunderstood, the pain I caused, the pain they caused, the intentions, the wounds, the fears, the weaknesses, all of it. And as a Christian, I had to trust that He could take painful, unfair, confusing things and somehow work them toward good. That does not mean everything that happened was good. It means I believe Christ is good. And as a Christian, if I believe He paid the price for my sins, my weaknesses, my pride, my blind spots, and my mistakes, then I have to believe He also paid the price for theirs. That does not remove accountability. That does not erase boundaries, and that does not automatically restore trust. But it does change what I do with judgment. At some point, I had to say, I will let Him judge, I will let Him heal, I will let Him work, and I will try to follow Him. That did not happen all at once, and it was not magical. It did not mean I never felt sadness again. Trust me. There's still definitely sadness. I still love people who hurt me. I still remember the good they brought into my life. And part of my healing has been choosing not to speak ill of them. Choosing to remember that at the heart of the problem, they think they are right, just like I think I am right. Maybe what we had was not pure evil. Maybe some of it was a painful difference of perspective. That does not remove the pain, but it does help me see them as human. And seeing someone's humanity does not erase what they did. It just keeps me from turning them into a monster in my own soul. Because when I turn someone into a monster, they still control the room. They still live in my head rent-free. They still become the central character in my pain. But when I can see them as human, flawed, accountable, and loved by God, I begin to take back control in my life. And that is what I want, freedom. One of the hardest parts of betrayal is that it does not only make you question the other person, it makes you question yourself. Your weaknesses feel exposed. Your mistakes feel magnified. The ideal version of who you thought you were suddenly collides with this rejected version you now fear you might be. And that is a brutal collision. Because when people walk away from you, misrepresent you, or reject you, it is easy to start wondering, was I ever good enough? Was I too much? Was I not enough? Was I foolish to trust? Am I lovable, forgivable, still worth choosing? That battle is real, and it is fought internally, alone. And sometimes in the middle of that pain, the only thing you can hold on to is a few fragile truths, like, I am forgivable, worthy, lovable, and still good enough. For me as a Christian, I also hold on to the belief that I am still a child of God. But whatever language you use, most of us know what it feels like to fight for a truth about ourselves when pain is trying to rip it out of our hands. Because pain is loud, rejection is loud, shame is loud, and especially the opinions of other people can be very loud. It's like trying to hear a song that reminds you of home while the world is blasting screamo music with the bass cranked up all the way. But somewhere underneath, if we listen carefully, there is a chorus still playing, which is reminding you that you are not your worst moment. You are not only what they said about you, you are much more. You are not only the mistake, you are not only the wound. But when pain is loud, that song gets really hard to hear. And sometimes healing means learning to listen for that song again. It means challenging the voices that are trying to define you. When shame says, you are not enough, you can ask, is that true, or is that the pain talking? When rejection says you are easy to leave, you can ask, is that the whole truth, or is that the one person's choice? When betrayal says you should never trust again, you can ask, how do I become wiser without becoming harder? When anger says, become cruel so you never feel weak again, you can ask, is that really who I want to become? That is where healing begins to turn into strength. Not because you deny the pain, not because you pretend the rejection did not matter, but because you stop letting the loudest voices become the truest voices. You begin to hold on to what is worth keeping, your integrity, your ability to love, your desire to become better, your commitment to protect your heart without hardening it. Your willingness to forgive without pretending. Your willingness to keep becoming even when pain gave you plenty of reasons to stop. Over time, holding on to those truths builds strength. It's like exercising a muscle. At first, it feels weak. Then slowly and often painfully, quietly, it grows stronger. You begin to let go of some of the dead weight. Every accusation, every rejection, every misunderstanding, every version of you that someone else created in their own pain. And you start asking a better question. Not just, why did they do this to me? But who do I want to become now? Do I want to become bitter? Do I want to become guarded? Do I want to become cruel? Do I want to spend my life trying to prove my worth to people who may never understand me? Or do I want to become more honest, more grounded, more compassionate, wise, more careful with people's hearts, more courageous in protecting my own? That is the part of the gift on the other side of the healing. Not that the betrayal was good, not that the rejection was fair, not that the pain was necessary, but that pain does not get the final word. You can walk through the noise and come out with a clear sense of who you are. Not because everyone understood you, not because everyone stayed, not because everything was repaired, but because you learned that rejection does not get to rename you. Pain does not get to define you, and betrayal does not get the final word on your worth. So how do we actually begin? Not theoretically, not in a quote on a sunset kind of way, but in real life, learn to let go. First, write it down. Write what happened. Write what hurt. Write what you lost. Write what you wish had been different. Write what you need now. Not because you are building a legal case, although your brain may arrive with exhibits A through Z and a surprise witness, but write it down because pain needs somewhere to go besides looping in your head. You're giving it a chance to be heard and helping your brain organize what was going on. Second, name what you are grieving. Ask yourself, what did this cost me? Did I lose trust, safety, closeness, confidence? Perhaps a version of the relationship I thought I had. Sometimes we stay stuck because we keep trying to forgive an event when we have not grieved the meaning of the event. Third, practice present moment mindfulness. When the loop starts, ask yourself, am I safe right now? How do I know? Is this moment still happening or is my body remembering it? What do I want to do with this memory now? What might become possible if I let myself carry this differently? What is one small thing I can do right now that moves me toward peace? Fourth, separate forgiveness and trust. Ask yourself, what would forgiveness look like internally? And what would trust require relationally? Those are different questions. Forgiveness may be about releasing resentment, but trust may require accountability, change behavior, and time. Do not confuse the two. That confusion is how people walk themselves back into unsafe situations and then wonder why their nervous system keeps throwing furniture inside. Fifth, take one act of release. Don't try to do the whole mountain at once, just one stone. Delete the draft. Stop rereading messages. Take the walk. Say a prayer. Word vomit to a loved one. Schedule a therapy appointment. Set the boundary. Have the honest conversation, and for goodness sake, stop checking their social media, which, by the way, is rarely healing. That is not closure. That is emotional raccoon behavior. And I say that with love. Choose one action that tells your body, we are not living there anymore. Letting go is not easy. It is not quick. It is not pretending. It is not excusing. It is not letting unsafe people back into your house. It is not removing consequences. It is not forcing reconciliation. Letting go is a slow, brave work of telling the truth, feeling the grief, setting the boundary, seeing the humanity, reclaiming your worth, and most especially, choosing not to let the wound become your home and your identity. For me, it is also the spiritual work of trusting Christ with the judgment, the healing, and the parts of the story I cannot fix. You may describe that differently. You may understand healing through different words, and I welcome and respect that. But whatever language you use, I hope you hear this. You can honor the hurt without letting it lead your life. You can remember what happened without rehearsing it every day. You can forgive without trusting. You can have compassion without giving access. You can grieve what you lost and still move toward peace. And one day, the same pain that feels like it might destroy you can become part of what deepens you. It can make you slower to judge, quicker to understand, more careful with people's hearts, more grateful for the relationships that remain, more aware of your strength, more committed to becoming the kind of person you actually want to be. Not because the pain was good, but because good can still grow after pain. So this week, ask yourself, what am I still carrying? What am I actually grieving? What boundary might help heal me? What would forgiveness look like if it meant freedom from not pretending? And what is one small act of release I can practice? Not because the pain did not matter, but because your peace matters too. Maybe forgiveness at its healthiest is not saying, it was okay. Maybe forgiveness is finally saying, I'm ready to stop letting this pain be in charge of me. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the lighter side of heavy things for more therapist insight, more humor, and more help carrying the heavy things a little more lightly. And in the comments, I would love to know, what is the one thing you are learning to let go of? Not all at once, not perfectly, just one honest step toward freedom.